Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. I'm excited to share more about historic windows. Obviously, a lot of our time towards the end is going to be question and answer because I anticipate a lot of questions. And I will do my best to either give answers now or later if I don't know offhand. But what I need to find out is who has the answers to our pop quiz. Because when you walked in, you were given a handout. And I think I shared with one or two of you that you already have some of the answers, and I appreciate your honesty, because if you actually go to the very back of your handout, assuming that you can read 2-point font, you've got your answers. But let's walk through it. I've got prizes for those that actually scored well, and it's a way for us to begin this workshop well. So number one, which residential property in Riverside Avondale area is individually listed on the National Register, apart from the Historic District? Anybody know? What did you say? Yes, it is. Lane Towers House on the river. You're right. Somebody's got an answer. Number two, and I should have included another word in there, but do you know why there are so few historic buildings in downtown Jacksonville older than 1901? Anybody know?
Fire.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I guess most of you guys do. Something I learned. Number three, what's a muntin? So this is where there's a lot of confusion. So it's better if I show you as opposed to telling you. So this is a muntin. The wood piece that goes between windows is a mullion. So there you go.
Sorry, what was the difference between them?
So a mullion goes between windows. The muntin goes between panes of glass. So there you go. All right. I didn't hear that. Next question. So what's one part of your house which is most important when it comes to impact rating and damage to a house from a hurricane? That's right, roof. Obviously, windows can have an impact as well, but more importantly is the roof. We'll talk about that later. Okay, a random question, but we'll see if you guys know it. What's the oldest window in Great Britain? Anybody know it? So this is where you go to that back page of your handout. So it is and it'll come up later, but it's a window that was supposedly built before 1066 in the St. Andrew's Church in the UK. I have a link there, so you can actually look it up yourself, and you'll see a picture as part of my presentation later. It's amazing how long the historic windows can last. And finally, this is pretty straightforward. What's one thing you can do today to save money on window work in the future? Don't break them is good, but touch up paint, touch up glazing. There's all kinds of things maintenance-wise that you guys can do to protect your windows. So, how'd you guys do? Who scored them all? Anybody got 5 right? 5 right? All right. I have a mug for you. All right, so let's jump in without further ado on the why. Now, let me just say up front, we do different kinds of workshops. This is more of a classroom education because, to be honest, we don't have a lot of time here. So I will focus more on the why, and we'll touch a little bit on the how depending on time before we get to your questions. We do offer a hands-on workshop. If you're interested in that, my contact information is on the back page as well, email and cell phone. If you let me know that you're interested in a hands-on workshop, it's possible we'll schedule one in early November in Melbourne. It's also possible we'll schedule one in January in Mount Dora. Again, those aren't around the corner, but if you're interested, we're trying to offer those to as many people as are interested. So without further ado, why do we restore? And you can follow along there, as well as if you haven't already noticed, you've got some fill in the blanks. That's why you've got a pen. So that what I'm trying to do is make sure that you're staying connected. So classroom. All right, so why restore? And I think it's important, even if you own a historic home, even if you're invested in a historic home, even if you're invested on a random Tuesday night to come to a church and listen to a workshop, I know that you guys are vested, but we live in a culture and a time when it's not intuitive for us, it's not natural for us to opt for restoration, right? Because I guarantee you 99% of us have this thing. So if this thing is struggling, falling apart, having issues, besides throwing it against the wall, all right, maybe that's not the best solution, besides bringing it to someone who can fix it, what typically is our knee-jerk reaction? Exactly. We have to replace it. And so we live in a very much a replacement culture, regardless of what object you're talking about, cars. And of course, that includes also now windows and doors. And so it wouldn't necessarily be intuitive for any of us to say, oh, I'm going to restore this window. And so even though that is something that's important enough to all of us, that's why you're here, I want to make sure that I walk through specifically the 5 reasons why we should seriously consider restoring our windows. And again, I don't know why you're here. Maybe I'm assuming you're a homeowner, historic homeowner, but maybe you love historic windows. Maybe you're on the fence. You're not sure what you want to do with these windows. And of course, historic homes have a lot of windows. So the struggle is what to do. So with that in mind, let's jump into our first reason why we restore. And that is your first blank in your handout, authenticity, which may be strange because, well, that's not practical. That's too ethereal. But if you really think about it and you think about authenticity, those specific historic windows were intended for your home in that spot because they weren't mass produced like replacement windows. Because again, I know when we're in this room, we're not just talking about restoration in a vacuum. We're talking about a contrast between restoration or replacement. So we're talking about historic windows that a architect, because of the scale, because of the beauty, intended to be in that exact spot on your house. Whether it's that window, and I can show you thousands of pictures of windows. In fact, in your handout, I want to say I should put page numbers on these so we can be on the same page, but there's one of your pages has, 25 or 30 pictures of historic windows from, I believe it's actually Italy. What I need to do is find historic window pictures from Riverside, Avondale, because I've driven around here enough. You have some beautiful homes, beautiful buildings, beautiful windows. But the point is that you're not going to necessarily find this on the shelf, mass-produced, ready to go into any home, historic home. Look at this. The architect, ironically enough, of this home found in Orlando was, I believe he was 17 or 18 years old, the son of an architect who architected this building near one of the historic districts in Orlando. Did a beautiful job. Obviously, it's a little bit photoshopped, but the point is that it's beautiful in part because they've retained the historic windows. It's authentic. It's authentic. So that's number 1. Walking through here. Number 2 is longevity. How many of you guys have been to Boston? This time of year, I love going to Boston, or as we get into the fall, and the leaves changing, it's beautiful. And if you've ever walked the Freedom Trail, I believe this house is on the Freedom Trail, you would have seen this house, the Paul Revere House, which was built in 1680. And wouldn't you know it, the windows on that house, most of the windows are original. How many years have those windows been in existence? 340 years plus. Historic windows have some semblance of longevity. Anybody been to this home? Yeah, Mount Vernon. So, fairly recent, 1758. was built, just 10 years ago. No, it's a beautiful home. And I mean, talk about a beautiful window. That Palladium window that you're looking at in that picture is original. It's historic. So here's the question, another quiz. What is the average window lifespan of a replacement window? And this is based on the warranties that they provide to us. And this is interactive. I want to make sure I keep you guys awake.
10 years? 25? 30.
So based on the warranties that we saw, this is what we came up with. And this is the glass more than the frame itself. The more expensive replacement windows last longer, to be fair. Less expensive, so that's about average. Now the question is, and if you think back just a few minutes ago to our pop quiz, you have an answer. What would be the window lifespan of a historic wood window? 1,000 years. If it's well maintained, that's the key. But they can last a long, long time. And just like I promised, there's your beautiful historic window from pre-1066 Norman invasion. It's crazy. So, we're walking through this. So why restore? What's reason number 1? Good. Reason number 2? Great job. You guys are listening. Reason number 3? Efficiency. So I know that some of you may be in your seats because when it comes to old wood windows, and now we're going to talk an English lesson because you guys know what an adjective is. So I need some adjectives. Like, just what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What first comes to your mind when I say old wood windows? Okay, yeah.
Character.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a mix. You're going to see, and I put a bunch of negative ones on here, but I know that the general public, obviously I'm asking what I hope are enthusiasts for historic wood windows, but if you were to ask the average public what first comes to mind when they think of old wood windows, unfortunately, I'm not agreeing with them necessarily, but that's typically what comes to mind. And so what first comes to mind when they think of old wood windows is not necessarily being energy efficient. And yet, they very well can be. And so that's what we're about to jump into. So now we jump from English into science. All right, so I need you to open your handouts if they're not already open. And we're going to talk through a few. I got a diagram of a double hung window if you don't know. But the page after that, the top of that page, above, and I don't know if you guys know, has ever seen a window like that? Anybody know what that is? Yes, good job. Where can you find a witch's window? What state? No, not as often as you can find it in this state that's just north and nearby. It starts with a V. Vermont. There's a lot of witches' windows. Anybody know why they're like weird and slanted like that? So, say that again? There are, that may be a reason. The lore, the myth is, and the reason that they call it a witch's window is supposedly it's slanted so a witch on a broom can't fly into it. It's also called a coffin window because that was supposedly a way they got the coffin out of the house on the second floor. So anyway, you can look it up. By the way, if you make it to Jeopardy, there you got your answer. All right, going to the top of that page, it says helpful definitions. And again, we're jumping into science. Embodied carbon versus operational carbon. So let me explain these terms by illustrating them via a car, okay? So when you came here, I assume nobody walked, so you all used some level of operational carbon to get here in your car, right? That's operational carbon, is the carbon you'd use to drive around in your car. Embodied carbon is the carbon used and emitted when your car was manufactured or built. Because the biggest frustration I have with those that knock historic wood windows because they're not energy efficient, supposedly, is that their definition of energy efficient is too narrow. And I am not saying we don't want, I hate double negatives. I want to make sure I'm being clear on this. I want to make sure that we are all being energy efficient. That's not my knock. That's not my point. But there's a bigger definition of energy efficient here. And that is, well, let me show this quote. So that's a mouthful. Anybody want to interpret that for me in layperson's terms? Based on what an IGU is an integrated glass unit. It's your average off-the-shelf double pane window. The point is that because the definition of energy efficient has been narrowed, all you're doing is minimizing. Excuse me. Let me start over. So the idea is if you're replacing that single pane glass window with a replacement window, you're not saving the energy efficient. You're not being energy efficient at all. So the point is though, in terms of operational carbon, you're so focused on the minimal savings you'd have from that by replacing it, that you're not seeing the big picture of the embodied carbon that you're wasting at the same time by installing and essentially encouraging that manufacturing. Does that make sense? Trying to be as crystal clear as I can. I apologize for my throat issues. So, we've talked about science, and I know that you didn't come here necessarily for school, but you're getting it anyway, because my point is, if you're just getting my opinion on why you need to restore, then you're in the wrong place. I want to make sure that you guys get facts, and then you guys make your decision about restoration based on that. And so I'm giving you science facts. I'm giving you now math facts. Abacus, anybody? So we're going to get into now comparisons. Because again, I can say all I want all day long that a historic wood window is energy efficient. But what does that mean? And putting it up against other windows, does that really meet the tests? So this is the modern current energy code, the International Energy Conservation Code. And what it says here is windows, skylights, sliding glass doors shall have an air infiltration rate of not greater than 0.3 cubic feet per minute per square foot. That's a mouthful, but the point is that historic windows which don't meet that then are more drafty. Again, I'm trying to interpret this for layperson's terms. And there's different kinds of energy efficient standards that we're looking at having it meet. This is the air infiltration one. So the idea is, because historic windows are, like we talked about in terms of adjectives, so drafty, the assumption is a historic window can't even touch that. That's why I need to replace my windows. No, let's jump into that test. So we actually performed the test. And so can you guys hear me if I speak louder? I just want to make sure you guys can hear me all right. So the control window was your average unrestored single pane window. And the lower the number, the better the test, but it was 0.69. So obviously that's not real good and it's basically double what is required to meet code. But if it's restored and with a little bit of help, we meet the code and beat the code in terms of a restored window. So let me show you one example. So if you restore the window and include an interior storm window, that's this sample I brought. That is window number 5 here, which is 0.11, which is literally it beats the code by 3 times. I need to get out of the way of the projector so you guys can see. So, and there are obviously other examples of windows. So if you include an integrated metal weather stripping, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with weather stripping. I didn't bring an example, but if you put weather stripping around your window, you have it restored, and integrated is a specific product, but it also beats the code by 3 times. So we're not talking about doing anything dramatic to your window. We're talking about a restored window, adding weather stripping, adding an interior storm panel. And so with a little bit of help, the historic window can not just meet the current modern air infiltration code, it can blow it away by 3 times. So, all right, let me show you another example of a different code. So let's jump to the helpful definition. So this is that same page with the witches window. And if you jump to the helpful definitions that are below that, we're going to talk about 2 other tests. One is called U-factor. And if you've ever shopped for, I never have, but shopped for replacement windows, this type of test is what is addressed on these replacement windows in terms of why they're worth purchasing those windows. So again, now you're empowered and educated as you talk to whoever you would talk to. So the U-factor test measures how well the window insulates. These are different tests measuring a certain aspect of a historic window's energy efficiency. And this one is insulation, which obviously is climate dependent, which is why we need to bring up this map. And obviously you can see where Jacksonville is, right? Basically, a little number 2 almost points at it, or a little bit west of where we're at here in Jacksonville. And so let me bring up another slide. There's a lot here. Fenestration is another word for window. So assuming that we want them operable, I'm looking at 0.65 because we're in zone 2, operable fenestration. So skipping ahead to that test, so there it is. So again, our control panel is the, again, unrestored single pane wood window, which again, doesn't do very well. But all you need again is window 2 as an example. And again, there's other examples as well for ways that beyond restoration, your historic wood window can be extremely energy efficient. And so 0.55, it beats the code again by 0.05. You have other examples as well. An exterior wood storm, it beats the code by about 0.11. And there's other examples as well. Pilkington Spacia is a type of glass. It's very expensive. But again, if you're serious about being energy efficient, there are ways to blow the code away. So next, SHGC, solar heat gain coefficient is what that means. So that's going back to our helpful definitions. That measures how much of the sun's heat is coming through the window. And so again, that's not just based on climate then, you're also based on orientation, meaning north, east, west, south. Because obviously, if you're on the north side, if a window's on the north side, it's going to get less of the sun's heat than a window on the south side of the house. So if you look at this test, this is more film related or a solar screen. But again, what I'm trying to do is illustrate the ways that via different tests that are testing for energy efficiency, you can see that a historic window that's restored with a little bit of help is just as, if not more, than energy efficient than its replacement cousin. And there's proof. There's proof. So number 1, why do we restore? Great job, making sure you guys are awake. Number 2, longevity. Great job. Number 3, efficiency. And finally, number 4, affordability. So I know that restoration for a lot of people doesn't seem like it makes sense. Get what I did there? C-E-N. Yeah. Trying to make sure you guys are awake. Trying to keep you guys with me. I know we just plowed through English, math, and science, so I appreciate you guys keeping track. And again, I'm trying to get through this so we can get time for question and answer. But I feel like it's really important to lay out why restoration is important. So we talked about this a little bit, but this actually makes the case in terms of energy efficiency and affordability. Because one reason that people do prefer to replace their windows is because they think that it's going to make their house more energy efficient. But if you look at the math and the sense of it, the money, it doesn't make sense. Because if you look, so these are a little bit dated, but this is an Energy Star chart. This is not us. This is somebody who's objective. You've got here Florida. It's $150, and again, it's statewide. And again, this is a little bit dated. I think numbers today would be more expensive. So the assumption is that you have a house that's about 2,000 square feet. The assumption is that you've got 20 historic windows that are about, and I know that most of us have one or two more, maybe three, maybe a lot more. So anyway, I'm starting with basic math because I was not a math wizard in college. But 20 windows at about 36 inches by 60 inches. And so if you take the savings, it's approximately $7.50 per window per year. So the total per window is about $150. So again, if we're trying to get you to a place where you're seeing the facts of what you're really saving by replacing your windows, and what the return on investment is. And again, I think that's assuming a less expensive replacement window. But even assuming all this math, it's going to take you almost 87 years to get a return on investment if you replace all your windows and assume that the energy savings from doing that is going to be worth it in the end. Does that make sense? Good. So, one last chart here. This is a big one. This is essentially the cost of ownership. Because like I said, we're not in a vacuum. It's restoration versus replacement. But the big question I would have is, what's the apples to apples comparison? Because let's say that I do want to restore, and let's say that my windows, there's some of them that need help, and we'll talk about what we can do with that. But let's say that I'm looking at the cost and looking at the price. And so apples to apples, what does this look like? And it's a big chart, and there's a lot going on here, which addresses waste, restoration versus waste for replication, or for replacement, excuse me. And there's 3 different kinds of replacement windows as options. Again, prices are a little bit dated. I believe we put together this chart around 3 or 4 years ago, but it works as a comparison. And so let's say that, and again, it's probably a stretch to say that you're going to own a home for 60 years. I know the average American moves every 6 to 7 years, but go with me. So again, assuming the same assumptions that we made about the previous chart, 20, it's 1/1 double hungs with new glazing, putty, and weather stripping. And so that, for example, at the very top, historic wood windows, we're assuming that you'll have some energy savings, and then year 10, you'll do some painting, so there'll be some labor, materials, and maintenance. So that's where the cost, from 0 to about 35 is coming in, as you're seeing painting and reglazing and doing all the maintenance that's necessary. And then in the 40th year, we're assuming that you're going to hire a company to fully restore the windows again, because at some point, it just gets, it's hard to just touch it up. You need to refresh it. Versus vinyl, new wood, and clad windows every about 20 years, and we're being gracious, we feel like, to do that. You're replacing your windows. And then you've got, obviously you've got a little more energy savings there, so we're trying to be fair to the replacement windows. There's a little more waste. So then if we take that all in total to the end, this is what you get. So, and we want to be fair. If you're replacing with vinyl, it's going to be a little cheaper. You may have to replace your vinyl windows a little more often. Historic wood windows, hiring a company is not cheap, but ultimately, you're going to be saving in the end, especially if you're looking for quality windows. All right, safety. So again, we talked about authenticity. We talked about longevity. We talked about efficiency. I'm hearing you guys whisper it. We just talked about affordability. And now we're going to safety. Now, I know that some of us, or at least there are concerns out there about wood windows, historic wood windows. Besides, I already showed you one, but besides potentially lead paint, what are some other safety concerns that people may have? Yeah, fragile glass. Good point. Yeah. Yeah, egress, like trying to just get out because they're painted shut, or
They've been painted
And have been painted shut for 50 years? Yes, in the back. Yes, yep. Plenty of wood rot.
Foundation shifting.
Yeah, well, that's another issue, but
Window looks like.
yes, that's true. Window becomes cockeyed. I heard something else in the back?
Water infiltration.
Yes, water infiltration. I will deal with, and I can deal with some of those at question and answer time, but let me start off with lead paint. I think the concern is, lead's dangerous. Lead paint can be dangerous, and the assumption is that maybe you don't have any lead paint on the surface, but if you dig deep enough, because most of us have windows, historic wood windows that have maybe 8, 9, 10 layers of paint, you're going to find lead paint. So what do we do, especially if we're going to do the restoration ourselves? I don't want to minimize the danger, but at the same time, I don't want to over-exaggerate the danger either. If you take care of yourself, you're fine. Just because there's lead paint in your windows doesn't mean you're harmed at all. It's once that paint becomes airborne, that's when you need to take precaution. And as long as you take proper precautions, you're fine. So if you're doing it, you just make sure that you're doing it. You take the sash elsewhere, or you put a plastic barrier around it to protect your family, loved ones, pets. And then you also use a serious mask. You wear special clothes. I mean, you need to take proper precautions. Our outfit, I work for Austin Historical, we are EPA certified to do lead containment, and that's what it involves. We actually have what's called a stripping room in our 19,000 square foot warehouse, and that's what we do. It's guarded off. We don't eat. We don't drink there. We're careful. So as long as you take the proper precautions, you are fine. There's nothing to worry about as long as you're not ingesting it, and as long as you're not carrying it on your person, so it just drifts off and someone else is able to ingest it. The biggest concern is if you're actually doing the work yourself, just take those proper precautions. So that's lead paint. Number 2, which was mentioned, fragile glass. Isn't historic glass more fragile, is the way I've heard it phrased before. And I would say not necessarily. Most windows, double pane, are made of 1/8 inch glass. It's flat glass. It's not wavy glass. It's not antique in that way. You get old enough, the glass can be a little skinnier. But the point is that all glass, to a certain degree, is fragile. Now, obviously, we're not talking about 1/4 inch laminate. That's a different product. That's a glass. I call it a glass plastic sandwich. That's what's in your windshield. And there are windows that are made of that. That's more of a safety glass. Tempered is a little bit different of a glass, but even that is breakable. If somebody wants to get into your house through your window, regardless of whether you have a replacement window or a historic window, they'll find a way. So I wouldn't be so concerned about the fragile glass issue. And if you are, we can always talk about how we can help you with that as a solution. Number 3, which wasn't brought up, but I've heard as a concern, and that is asbestos. Asbestos. It isn't a huge concern for most windows here, but steel casements that were built and glazed in the 30s and 40s did have some asbestos. If you are at all and ever concerned about what is on your windows, the company's name is Western Analytics out of California. They charge a fee. You mail them a sample. They'll test the sample. They'll send you a copy after, I want to say, a week and a half, 2 weeks, of exactly to the scientific digit what is in that sample. And then you don't have to be concerned, or you do have to be concerned. But my guess is most of you do not have to worry about asbestos in your windows. But again, if you're concerned, that's one way to deal with it. Next, security. I think that goes hand in glove a little bit with fragile glass. But some people are concerned because it's just like most historic windows have a sash lock and maybe a sash lift, but there's not a lot of hardware to protect or to keep the thieves out. And again, like I said about the fragile glass, if they want to get in, they'll find a way in. So if you're concerned about safety, if that's a concern at all, let's talk about that, or we can discuss that a little bit at Q&A, because we have some solutions that can help. Ultimately, I assume most of you guys live in a decent neighborhood. To me, it's about risk management, and that I'm not so concerned about. But what I did want to make sure that we emphasize and talk a little bit about, because you may be here for this reason, is impact protection. Because if people don't replace their windows because of energy efficiency questions, then sometimes they're more apt to replace them because of impact protection. And I get it. We live how close to the coast? Yeah, we're in Florida. We're not that far from the coast. We see hurricanes start developing in Africa, and within 2 hours of their development, the forecasters are in your room. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. And no, I know, we need to be safe and we need to take precautions. At the same time, it's about risk management. So with impact protection, there are two separate questions that I want to make sure I'm addressing very, very directly. Number one is safety, right? Because if a hurricane's coming and we have historic windows, the question and the concern might be, am I safe, right? And I want to tell you that for most of you, and I'm going to skip to, we'll look at that. I've got a short little video I could show you. But how many of your windows have been in place and not been damaged and still got its wavy glass 100 years later? And that's not to say that there won't be a hurricane next week, next year, because we're in hurricane season, that does make landfall and directly impacts the Jacksonville area. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take precautions, but again, it's about risk management. And so don't say, we have to replace all our windows, tomorrow because we're fearful of hurricanes. At the same time, we should take precautions. So if you're concerned about that at all, I'll show you a picture of it, but we are in the final stages of testing a storm window that's historic replica that will be Miami-Dade impact rated. Miami-Dade impact rated. So if you're, and that'll be minimal cost versus replacing your whole window. And it will be historic board friendly because it will be historic replica of the window you have. It'll be custom made. So if you're interested at all in that, let me know. But that is one way to resolve that safety issue. The other concern, the other question that comes up and is understandable when we're talking about impact protection is, I want that homeowner's insurance deduction. And I don't blame you. And so we get a lot of people that say, how do I get that and keep my historic windows? Good question. So let's keep moving forward, because what's the goal of impact protection? And I kind of addressed it indirectly at the pop quiz. What's the goal?
Keep the refund.
Yeah. Ultimately, the insurance companies are trying to reduce their liability, right? And their liability is going to be reduced if the roof stays on the house, right? So this is one alternative that we believe both will save you about the same amount of money as replacing all your windows. And it's not only replacing windows, every opening in your house would have to be impact rated in order to qualify for the homeowner's insurance savings. So instead of doing that, invest in hurricane clips. Now, I know that some historic homes, it may be tough to get access to every rafter. I get that. And if you are at all interested in getting someone else to install them for you, maybe we can help. But the best solution we've come up with in terms of the ROI savings is this, because for minimal amount of money and time, you can save just as much on your homeowner's insurance and at the same time get that savings and protect your roof. This is an example of where that would clip on your roof, on your rafter. And this is the example of that impact rated storm window. We've talked a lot in the last 50 minutes about why. Authenticity, longevity. Anybody remember number 3? Efficiency, affordability, and safety. So why restore? Is it worth it to restore? Absolutely. So let's get into a little bit. I'm going to dabble a little bit in the how. And I think when we talk about the how, we need to talk about what do your windows need? because not every window that's on your house or on a house you're looking at owning needs everything, right? Sometimes, and this is the same car, it's a car analogy. I mean, sometimes when your car, it needs something, it doesn't need the full jalopy of, it doesn't need a full body work, and maybe it just needs a car wash, similar to a wood window. So maybe your car, kind of like a Tesla, it just needs a little bit of energy efficiency. Maybe it needs a little bit of extra love in terms of rot repair or body work, would be the car analogy. Maybe it needs a little bit of operability. It's painted shut, or maybe it's been painted shut for 50 years, so how are you going to reopen it? Maybe it needs a little bit of cosmetic love. It needs some touch-up because the paint's peeling. It could use a little bit of extra work. Maybe it just needs a little bit of maintenance, like an oil change. So this is really where I want to harp on why restoration is important. And I've saved this to the end. These are the same species of wood, the same, almost, size of wood. But this is from 1919. This is from 2019. Same thing. This is what your old growth wood windows are made of. This is what you could get them rebuilt with if you need them rebuilt. Do you see a difference? You'll feel them. One is significantly heavier. One is more substantial. And if you've ever had to nail or screw into your house, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just all you're trying to do is hang a painting, for goodness sake. Why is it taking so long to get this nail in the wood? So, and maybe it doesn't look as different. Obviously, the 2019 is a little bit smaller because a 2x4 isn't a legitimate 2x4 anymore. But you can tell a major difference by how they feel and how they look. And so what do you have? So does anybody know what type of car that is? That's right. Do you great job. Not colorblind. What year?
50s?
Close. 60, I believe it's 62. 62 GT. Anybody know what that's worth right now? I did look it up.
More than my house.
Yeah, it is. It is worth a lot. From the websites I looked at, it's worth around $20 million. Obviously, it's got to be in mint condition to be worth that much, but it's worth a lot. Okay, so what kind of car is that?
Kia.
So I know you see where I'm going. You guys are all very smart people. Most people, when they're looking at historic old windows, they see that. But that's what they have. And so this is what ends up happening, is they end up, because they keep seeing that, they replace that with that. Now, that's not a bad car. I know I'm going to offend somebody because I know somebody in here has a 2021 Ford Focus, and they're going to be like, he just dissed my car. I paid pretty good money for that. And that's worth, I did look up, if it's in good condition, you're probably going to still pay $30,000 to $35,000 for a Ford Focus. But is that car that car? No. And so, to me, the best argument to be made for restoration is just that. And I get it. Restoration, especially if you're doing it yourself, is time. And if I know anything about Americans and myself, I get frustrated when I have to wait an extra 30 seconds at a traffic light. I hate that about myself. I know time is money. And when you're talking about a DIY process, you could be looking at a lot of time. However, this is my encouragement. And if you don't take anything away from this, I pray you take this. And that is maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. And maybe you don't have windows that are in decent shape. That's another conversation. But if you have windows that are in decent shape, all you have to do is just do the maintenance. I mean, we all have a car, and I know I was told numerous times to get the oil change every 3 months. Now I think cars can go 3 or 4, maybe 5 months without an oil change. But the point is, I had a friend who bought a car and waited about a year to do an oil change, except it didn't last a year. I think it blew up about 11 months in. And she's like, what happened? And we were talking through it. I'm like, I don't know. And then I realized, did you actually change the oil? Well, I thought when I put gas in, I thought that was good. No, you actually need to change the oil. So when we're talking about maintenance, we're talking about just a regular, and when I talk about maintenance, I'm not talking about you have to go out to your windows once a week. I'm talking about maintenance is approximately once or twice a year. And I know that a lot of you have a lot of windows. So when you go out and look at those windows, it's going to take you time. But if you just do, and this is going to walk through, but just get in a routine. Touch up the paint, cleaning, lubricate the mechanicals, glazing, putty touch-up, spot rot repair, whatever it is. All right, so now I'm going to get to the good stuff, and that is how to restore, right? So obviously I don't have a lot of things to do here, because as I said, if you're interested in doing a hands-on workshop, we will have those. This is not that. But I'm going to whet your appetite. That's my goal. My goal is to get you excited to go home and restore your windows tonight. You can do it. So what is a window? So I'll just start off by, again, demonstrating. So kind of like, I don't know if you know the name Vince Lombardi, but Vince Lombardi was a legendary Green Bay Packers coach. And he started off one of his talks to his players by holding up a football and basically saying, "This is a football." And then one of the players sarcastically responded back, wait, coach, you're going too fast. So this is a sash. So let's turn to that diagram on your handout. Perfect. And maybe you guys are way ahead of me. Because honestly, I think I was so concerned about time, I almost went too fast through some of the material, but we will get plenty of adequate time for questions. So if you see, and I think it does list, so on your handout, these two moving parts are the sash. And then around it, basically what it touches as part of the frame is what we call the jamb. And you can see it listed there. And there's a lot of other detail here that I give you that you can use. The sill, you've got where the weight pockets are. And typically you have a pocket door that gives you access to those weight pockets. So if you lift up the bottom sash, and again, I'm assuming most of you have double hung, but if you lift up that bottom sash and you look to the right or the left in the jamb, you should see, and if you don't, it can easily be any basic carpenter should be able to carve out a pocket door for you, but you should be able to get access to those weights that way. And sometimes getting your windows operable is just as simple as accessing that weight pocket, pulling the weights up, because most of the time, if the weights have been in there, they're just waiting for you on their old decayed ropes for you to just pick them up and bring them back to use. Pull that rope off, loop it through the pulley again using some kind of heavy weight and bring it down, tie it to that weight, and before you know it, you have operable windows again. I'll show you a video here, assuming we have time, to show you how it's actually pretty easy to do. And I'll say this, I had one of my good friends at one of my previous jobs tell me if you were the last person left on earth, I would never hire you as a handyman. So if I can do it, you can do it. I promise you that. So jam, sash, and the mechanicals. If you haven't been up here, I just encourage you to look at some of the hardware that's up here because you've got all kinds of things. This is called a casement stay. You've got, of course I pull this out, but it's attached, but you have a sash lift, you have pulleys. I try to give you examples of all kinds of hardware. This is what's called, well, anybody know what this is called? Anybody know their?
Put in the glass pins for diamond. That works with the diamond.
That's exactly right.
Glazing point.
Yeah, the glazing point. So when you install the glass into the sash, you bed it, but before you bed it, and you can kind of see it here, you typically, I don't know if you could see that, but you typically, to secure the glass in there, you'll blast a glazing point into the side of the wood. And you'll typically do that all 3 spots to, again, secure that piece of glass against the wood and then glaze around it. And then, finally, the trim and casing, which that's pretty obvious where that falls around the window. You guys are experts. If I put you in front of a window, you could pull out sash. It's not that hard. So what I want to do at this point, we have other videos I could watch, but I really want to make sure that I'm allowing adequate time for Q&A. But have your questions ready.
If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about the work of Riverside Avondale Preservation, follow us online. We're on all social media.
Thank you for helping us to preserve the most architecturally diverse historic neighborhood in the United States. To support our efforts, you can become a member or consider donating at riversideavondale.org today.
If you're ever looking for more information about what's coming up with RAP, we post all of our information on our channels and on our website. So if you're looking for information about our upcoming events, such as our annual home tour, our garden tour, holiday-themed luminaria event, our preservation awards, and other fun events, make sure to check those out.
Also, the Riverside Arts Market is a must-visit Saturday destination for locally sourced food, art, entertainment, and more from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.